We discussed yesterday the heter iska of the Chachmas Adam, which allows for a fixed amount of interest. And the basic scheme therein is that it's based on the Trumas Hadashim. They agree that the achrayus will be, of what happens to the money, will be on the nosein, on the person who's giving it. They agree they'll split the profits 50-50 and the loss 50-50. But the Mekabel says, I won't be trusted to say that there's a loss unless there's absolute Adam. And furthermore, he says, to say what the profit is, so we split it 50-50, I'm going to have to take a shvuah. So what does he say? I'll tell you what, I will give you a fixed amount of money every single month or every single year, instead of me having to take a shvuah as to what the profits are. And then whatever the profits really are, I'll get to keep it. I'm giving you a fixed amount of money instead of your 50% of the profits, which you, the provider of the money, the investor, is supposed to give me. And that's a way that you could even have a fixed interest with not violating the Torah of lending with interest.
Why would you do that if you think it's going to be significantly more?
Well, obviously, the person who gives the money is going to make sure that it's approximately what he wants to get. But the difference is that he's getting a guarantee.
But businesses, especially, unless you know exactly.
Well, that's
some better, some years are worse. So.
True, but that's how it is. And that, in other words, for example, when the bank is giving money to someone to start a business, that's how it would be structured. The bank always takes a fixed interest rate, right? Well, how are they taking a fixed interest rate if it's heter iska? What the bank is saying to the person is, listen, you're going to open up a business, you're going to sell apples, and you're going to make a lot of money. So you are going to have to take a shvuah, and you're going to have to give me half the profits. You know what? Instead of that, give me a fixed amount of interest, and you'll keep all the profits for yourself. My half of the profits, the bank's half of the profits, that is, you could keep two instead of give me a fixed interest. Okay?
The bank's lending; they're not in the business of being partners.
Well, but a heter iska means they're a partner to some extent. Okay, on page 107, we have another way that you could lend, so to speak, with interest. Obviously, not really. Siman Kuf Samach Zayin Sif Aleph. Here's how it works. Malva Adam l'chavero mona al t'nai she'is asek bo l'revach hamalva ad she'is shnei monim v'yeh b'achrayes hamalva ad osos man u'chsheyiu shnei monim yachsru shnei monim l'malva v'sham b'ilach yeh kol revach l'lova. The way it works is like this. The investor, lender, let's call him, gives the business entrepreneur $100. And he says, right now, this $100 is under my responsibility. It means if a circumstance happens beyond the control, the investor is responsible. Mm-hmm. And that scheme, that arrangement, that business deal will continue until the money accrues to $200. After it accrues to $200, says the investor, then you, the borrower, will keep that $200. But now that $200 will morph into a loan. And what does that mean, that it morphs into a loan? Now, if something happens beyond your control, you still have to give the money back to me. Because a deposit means you're not responsible if something happens beyond your control. A loan means you are responsible if something happens beyond your control. So again, another way that you could do this, according to the Mechaber, is I could give you $100 until it turns into 200. I, the giver, am responsible if something happens beyond your control to the money. But after it turns into 200, it's a loan, and you get to keep all remaining profits.
And if it never becomes 200?
Then it's a pikadon, then it always remains. Well, that's always the case, correct. Okay? Now, the Be'er Agra says you could only do this if it's clear when you do it that you're stating a business arrangement, as opposed to saying this is a way I'm going to lend you money. The Chelkas Yaakov grappled with this entire concept of heter iska. And by the way, he says there should be another clause in the heter iska. And that is they should write in the heter iska that if at any point in the transaction they're using the language of a loan, that they should really know it's a pikadon, it's a deposit. In other words, the idea of the Trumas Hadeshan's heter iska was that I give you money as a deposit, which means I, the giver, am responsible. The only thing you're responsible for is if you damage the money. But I set it up that you're not believed to say that you didn't damage the money unless you bring some sort of extraordinary proof like 280. Now, what happens is when you borrow money, you get a mortgage on a house from a mortgage company. So they give you 500 pieces of paper they have to sign this, sign that. And it all talks about loan documents. And then they also have a paper that you scribble on a heter iska. But the thing is, what about the language loan? So the Chalkas Yaakov said right in the language of the heter iska that any time you use the word loan in any other document, you really mean the idea of the Trumas Hadeshen that it's a deposit and it's not a loan. We're just using a loan colloquially because, that's how we need to talk. But it's not really a loan.
So why not use something else? This is just technicality.
You mean practically today?
Yeah.
Because it'll probably be illegal on a HUD farm.
Yeah, but what's happening right now is it's just trying to skirt around what the real halacha is, saying, we can quote this.
So again.
Practically a lot of halachas.
Right.
So not practical in today's time, in the sense of
right.
These
so
loans.
This was an old story.
You're not going to take a loan interest from somebody. Not going to get some free money all the time.
Right. So parenthetically, I'll tell you something interesting. Rav Moshe writes, and it doesn't work in the case of a bank, but there are some cases where you buy a house from someone, and the seller does what's called take-back paper.
Yeah.
You've heard the concept? Basically, what it means is that you are paying the seller over the next 30 years the purchase price of the house plus the interest as if the seller were the bank. And the seller usually also, like the bank, will put a lien on the property or hold title until such time as you finish paying it up. You're familiar with this, right, folks?
If the seller has a lower rate than the bank, they'll keep.
Yeah, the people do it also, or maybe you're the type.
You have to find an individual who's willing. Meaning, if a bank's not doing it,
right? Maybe it's a type. Right, but let's say with the seller. So the seller of a house. So Moshe says what you actually could do is, if let's say the house is selling for $700,000, and you figure out that the interest amortized over 30 years will get you to $1.3 million. You could sell the house just. Okay, 1 second. Let's just give an example. I don't know. I don't have math in my head. You'll sell the house for $1.3 million.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you're structuring it is that on the HUD document, it says 700 with X% interest rate to be paid over 30 years. He says, because really, between you and the seller, you're both from Jews. You know you're selling it for 1.3 million. Shine, that's the document you need to write from the government to make everything legit. But let's not worry about that. Ramosha says, Ramosha has this heter. That's just a technicality. The truth is, you're selling it for 1.3 million. After all, I could put whatever price I want on my house to sell to you.
So 700 and 600 is really the interest, but you're putting it in.
No, he's saying 700 plus 600 is really the purchase price to be paid out over 30 years. But you're putting in the HUD document has 700 plus the interest, whatever it'll be, because that's how the government wants us to trade properties. And if the government would find out that you're selling a house and you're putting a lien on and there's no loan going on here, the government will get upset at everybody because probably it skirts the law. So that's what Ramosha says. It's an interesting point. Okay.
Those looking for you.
Right. Now I want to point out, if you look on page 113, and we're going to close out this sugya soon. The Shita Mekubetzes quotes the Ritva. Ritva was a Rishon. And the Ritva did not like the idea of the Trumas Hadeshen. He writes like this, on the second column where the gray is. If the whole business matter is really a deposit, right? That was the Trumas Hadeshen's idea. And we say that even if you make whatever interest rate, it's not interest. That there's no interest except for the loan. If the provider of the money is taking responsibility, it's a deposit, it's not a loan. Says the Shita, the Ritva, Ava ein laharim b'davar zeh. Please, don't do this as a loophole to get around the prohibition that you can't lend money with interest. So the Ritva says like you, the whole thing is a scheme. How can we do this? This is crazy. Ein laharim b'davar zeh. If I genuinely have a business interest with you, I'm genuinely partnering in starting a business with you, that's a whole different story. But if the whole way you're doing it is just to get around the prohibition of ribis, the Ritva holds in the haram b'davar zeh. The Ritva says that the best way to do it is when you divide the amount of money I give you as half a loan, half a pikadon, and that's how we split half the profits and half the losses. That being said, on page 114 of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, with a heter iska that works, where I'm giving half the money to you as a profit and half the money as a deposit, half the money as a loan, he says, but there's a huge problem. Imagine if I give you $1,000. Okay, we write in a document, not like the Trumas Hadeshin. Let's try to make it more like a real business. So I'll give you 50%, which is 500, as a deposit, and 50% as a loan, and then we'll split the profits and split the losses, right? You think you're going to do that for the normal interest that you collect on $500? No. You're going to raise up the interest rate for the normal interest that you collect on $1,000 and just claim you're doing it on $500. Oh, come on. Is that legit? And he says maybe this is actual ribis. However, he ends off like this. I'm not doubting the concept of a heter iska. It's known that we use this. It's a mitzvah to sort out exactly how this works, how we've waved away ribis so quickly by using this concept of a heter iska, either the Trumas Hadeshin's heter iska or a heter iska where it's 50, where we're structuring it as 50% loan, 50% profit to get away the Ritva's problem, but then saying, you're not you have to take a shvur that a certain amount of profit was garnered, and we're really saying that profit is the normal interest rate on the whole $1,000. That's really very, very hard to understand. So, L'maaseh Rabosai, we do use the heter iska. Ideally, it's best if it's used on only avak ribis. Avak ribis means that there's no fixed interest rate. But if there's a fixed interest rate, that's a very big shaila. Again, we had the Chachmas Adam that says the way it works is that you're giving the fixed interest rate instead of giving 50% of the genuine profits. But that is where we are today. And Mir Hashem will continue on Erev Shabbos with the next booklet of ribis. Everybody should have a wonderful day.